There's disappointing, there's underachieving, and there's 3-10. How did the Jets team with such high expectations fall so far? Let's dive in and find the answers today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, December 11th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel because new customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, today we have our weekly mailbag show. Each Wednesday we try and do a mailbag with listener questions. Thanks so much to everybody who sent in those questions. Let's start. First question, John. I wasn't expecting the Jets to go to the Super Bowl. I never really believed all the buzz, but I don't think anybody could have seen a 3-10 season coming. Even if you thought the Jets would fall short of expectations, nobody thought they'd be one of the worst teams in the NFL. How did they get to this point? And I think everything in that question is accurate. I think even those of us who were a little skeptical that the Jets were really that good, never really thought the Jets would be this bad. I actually, before the season, I saw a scenario where the Jets would be a losing team. I saw a scenario where they'd miss the playoffs. And I viewed that as a complete catastrophe considering how much they had invested in this season. But I never thought we'd be sitting here on December 11th with the Jets at 3-10 and only one game out of the top pick in the NFL draft in 2025. It's really kind of unbelievable how far they've fallen. And for a failure this wide in scale, there's no one answer. It's a very complex answer. There are a lot of different factors that play into it. I mean, I think first of all, you talk about what the preseason projections were. A lot of those preseason projections thought the Jets were going to get high caliber quarterback play and high caliber defensive line play. And those are arguably the two most important spots on any football team. You know, there are other spots you can talk about. You can talk about offensive line, talk about wide receiver, you can talk about corner, but I think a lot of prognosticators, I would even dare say most prognosticators thought the Jets would be getting, even if Aaron Rodgers wasn't an MVP level quarterback, they thought they'd be getting very high caliber quarterback play. And again, very high end defensive line play. And that has not happened. In fact, the Jets have gotten low level starter quarterback play and maybe the worst defensive line play in the National Football League. I mean, outside of Quinn and Williams and Will McDonald is a pass rusher, there really are just no good players on this defensive line. And of course, the expectations for the defensive line, Hassan Reddick was a big part of those, even though we knew he was holding out at the time, in the preseason, he was holding out. I think a lot of us were hoping or maybe expecting that he would come back and play at a high level. He's come back and done nothing. He's been a total non-factor for this football team. So, I mean, I think tangibly that's one of the first places you look to is the level of play, because these are critical positions. And when you're expecting to get really, really good play out of quarterback and really, really good play out of the defensive line, and you get this, it really has an impact on your football team. If you had told me the Jets would be getting bottom of the league quarterback play and bottom of the league defensive line play before the season, I would have told you that this is probably not going to be a very good football team, because to be bad in both spots, that really alters your trajectory as a football team. And one of the things I always say, I say frequently, is that before the season, the talent was overrated. And that's what I'm talking about. It's not that the Jets team lacks talent. It's not that this is a team that should be a team contending for the number one pick in the draft. It's not like this is the Mike McCagnon, Adam Gase days where there's just no talent anywhere. There is talent on the team, but it's nowhere close to the level of talent it was projected as. And I think you have to look at the quarterback position. I think you have to look at the defensive line for starters. I think there are other aspects here. Everybody knows this coaching is not good. And the coaching has gotten worse as the season's gone on. I think it's clear now that, and if it wasn't clear at the time, that while Robert Saleh is a very poor head coach on the NFL level, firing him 5 games into the season was an incredible misstep by Woody Johnson. It was a clear panic move. Even at the time, it was not a move made from a position of strength. It was a desperation move, and it has completely backfired. Jeff Ulbrich has shown that he is not up to the task. And I said at the time, So this is not really a second guess. To put a first-time head coach into a situation like this, a guy who Jeff Ulbricht's entire head coaching experience was the Senior Bowl last winter. And to put a guy who's literally coached one college all-star game as a head coach into a situation where you have this many big personalities, you have these expectations, it's New York, it's all the pressure. You thought he was going to turn the ship around at 2-3. That was a very dubious, very, very dubious decision, a very, very dubious theory. And you see it manifest itself in so many different ways. How many times the Jets come out unprepared to play a game. I'll give you another example. The kickoff return Sunday, when the Jets took the lead in the last minute, Jets gave up a big kickoff return to Malik Washington. Ulbricht later said that Anders Carlson was supposed to kick the ball out of the back of the end zone. He kicked it short. I mean, just like basic communication things that aren't happening on this football team. And that has to go to coaching. And you look at the offense, the unimaginative nature of the offense. And look, a lot of that goes back to Aaron Rodgers because of how much control he has over the offense. And at the line of scrimmage, he's pretty much deciding which play. It doesn't matter which play was called. Aaron Rodgers is deciding which play they run at the line of scrimmage because he has full authority to change things up. But it's just a very unimaginative play design. And the fact that people are actually kind of positive on Todd Downing tells you how bad Nathaniel Hackett was. And I think it's fair to be positive on Todd Downing because he's an upgrade over Nathaniel Hackett. But Todd Downing is also a bottom-tier offensive coordinator. It just bottom tier is way better than Hackett. Hackett was the absolute worst in the league. So you've upgraded from absolute worst in the league to bottom tier, but he's still a bottom-tier offensive coordinator. He's not a very good assistant coach. He's not a guy. I mean, would you like to see Todd Downing retained by the next coaching staff? I certainly would not. And I think you also have to acknowledge that this team's been a little snake bitten in close games. Last year the Jets were really fortunate to be 7-10, and that's one of the bad pieces of analysis that came out of last season with people saying, well, they won 7 games without Rodgers. That's pretty impressive. If you watch the way that team played, it was not that impressive. They first of all, they were 5-10. They were out 3 weeks left with 3 weeks left in the season. They were completely eliminated from the playoff race. Second, after that, they beat Washington, who picked second in the draft, and New England, who picked third in the draft in their final 3 weeks. But third, they had a lot of crazy last minute escapes. The Buffalo game where they were behind in the fourth quarter, the Philadelphia game where they were behind, with less than 3 minutes to go, and the Eagles had the ball. The Giants game where the Giants pretty much just gifted the Jets a win because the Giants had the game won and threw it away. Last year the Jets were very fortunate. This year the Jets have been a little snake bitten. They've been a little unlucky. It's not all about luck, of course, but when you lose as many close games as the Jets have, and Jets have lost almost every close game they've been in. They beat Tennessee in the last minute. They had that stand deep in their own part of the field. They had that. I don't think it was a goal line stand, but a goal to go situation. The Jets defense got to stop. Outside of that, the Jets have not won any close games this year. So close games come down to two things. They come down to how you play, and they also come down to factors like luck. Do you get a bad call that goes against you? Does a tipped ball fall into a defender's hands or fall to the ground? Does a fumble bounce your way? Any number of factors could play into a close game. Some of which you control, some of which you don't. And the Jets have been unlucky in close games. That's not the reason that they're bad, but it might be the reason that they're 3-10 opposed to 5-8. The way the Jets have played this year is more in line with the way you'd expect a 5-8 team to play, or maybe even a 6-7 team. This is a bad team. It's a team that should have a losing record. It's a team that was vastly overrated relative to its talent level. It's a team that's very poorly coached, but it's also a team that's had its share of bad breaks in close games. So those are the big things. And we could probably go on with some of the other more minor factors, but you don't get to 3-10 by having with one thing being wrong. And that's one of the things we've talked a lot about on the show is how the Jets kept looking for the magical quick fix, like that one silver bullet that was going to fix everything when they fired Robert Saleh and when they traded for Devontae Adams and when they when they signed Hassan Reddick. The Jets kept looking for they kept acting like their one move will fix everything. The issue is that the team is much more fundamentally flawed than that. And with a fundamentally flawed team and bad luck along the way, well, it's no surprise you're 3-10. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the future. Jets need to figure out what they're doing at the quarterback position if we presume Aaron Rodgers is gone. Should they look to the draft? I have some thoughts on that. I'll tell you what they are as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent paychecks just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless, and access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members. Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure to use our link so they know we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Let's continue now with our weekly mailbag. Our next question, John, given how weak the upcoming quarterback prospects are perceived to be in the draft and the lack of internal options, how can the Jets realistically upgrade the quarterback position? Someone needs to start week 1 in 2025. Who do you think it will be? So that's a really good question. So I'll throw out one caveat here. I'm always hesitant at the idea, and I look, I'm as guilty as anyone for saying it. I know I say it a lot, but I think we should be a little bit hesitant to declare that a quarterback class is not any good or a quarterback class is great, because frequently these prognostications are incorrect. In 2017, the view was that the class was very weak, and that was the Patrick Mahomes class. In 2020, it was not viewed as a particularly strong class. It was viewed as an okay class. You had Joe Burrow and you had Tua Tagovailoa going early in the first round. But beyond that, you also had Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. You got 4 quality starting quarterbacks out of that class. In 2021, it was viewed to be as like an all-time great class. And that class has been not good. Trevor Lawrence is at least a viable starting quarterback, but he's kind of like at the low end of the projections where he's just an okay starting quarterback. And after that, it's bust city. It's Zach Wilson, who we know well, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Justin Fields. I mean, really, Trevor Lawrence is the best of the 2021 class, and he isn't that great. So all this is to say, although the perception, and look, again, I'm probably as guilty as anybody as for falling into this trap, I do think we need to be a little careful with the perception. Is a quarterback class good or is it not? Now, that said, I would strongly lean towards the Jets not drafting a quarterback this year. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. I'm never a believer in the idea, we'll just draft a quarterback next year. Because again, we don't know how good the class is going to be next year. That's a long way off. Quarterbacks could emerge. Quarterbacks could disappoint. I remember in 2019, Joe Burrow began the season as like a late round pick. I mean, at the start of the 2019 college football season, Joe Burrow was projected as like a 6th round pick. He ended up going number 1 overall in the draft and is now one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league. And you never know when you're going to have an opportunity to pick a quarterback. You may say, well, just pick a guy next year. Well, then there may not be a good guy available to you next year. There may be a good guy available to you this year. So you might say, well, it's strange that you're saying don't draft a quarterback this year in that context. But I just don't think the Jets organization right now is equipped to develop a young quarterback. I think we've seen over and over that they don't do the right things, that they put too much pressure on the young quarterback. And I think, maybe ownership's involved in this, but the young quarterback has to play immediately. They don't put the proper pieces around them. And, it's great when you have like a prodigy, like a CJ Stroud or a Joe Burrow who steps on the field and immediately knows what to do. It's great when you have a guy who's already a pro quarterback who you draft, but that doesn't always happen. And even guys you draft early, there are a lot more Zach Wilsons than there are Joe Burrows. Guys who need coaching, who need help, who aren't ready to play day one. And I don't think the Jets are built to nurture a young quarterback. I think the Jets will just throw a young quarterback on the field and ask him to save the franchise, because we've seen that over and over and over with this ownership. So my inclination would be build the team up around the young quarterback. Put yourself in a position where you're ready. It may take a couple of years. It may take a year, 2-3 years, but actually build a team up. Build the offensive line. The offensive line's decent, but keep building. Get that right tackle position figured out. So add a supporting cast around Garrett Wilson. Get a good system in place. Do all the other things, then bring the quarterback in. Then get yourself in a position where you might be able to develop a quarterback. But I don't want I think with the Jets, the quarterback's always like the first piece, and it never works for this team. It works for other teams, but it doesn't work for this team. Again, I think a lot of that might have to do with ownership. So where do you turn? Well, I think realistically, if we're looking at this 2025 season, it's probably going to be a reset year for the Jets. The cap situation is not great. they're going to have to fill a lot of positions right now. They have a lot of guys who aren't going to be here next year. They also have a number of holes at key spots anyway. So my general view is that I don't know how much it really matters. I think you go the veteran stopgap route, and of those guys, I think Jameis Winston might be the best one. Jameis Winston has his issues, but Jameis Winston can produce. Jameis Winston can put points on the board, and he can move an offense. Now, he'll destroy you with the big mistake. Jameis Winston's the classic guy. The old expression, he's always good enough to get a job, but never good enough to keep a job. Well, maybe he'll have the job next year with the Jets. I think it's going to be somebody of that group, of that type. It's going to be like just a veteran guy who's, one of the top 32 quarterbacks in the league, but not that great. You just roll with him. He'll be the stopgap. He'll maybe win you a couple of games next season, and you just keep building the team up. And then once the team's built up, you get the young quarterback. I think other teams are better at developing quarterbacks than the Jets right now. And I just don't want to see the Jets go down that road, because again, with this ownership, it's always the same thing. It's always like, we'll draft the quarterback. He's the new savior. We'll throw him out there, even though he doesn't know how to read the defense. We won't put the pieces around him. We won't give him the support. We won't give him quality coaching. At some point, something's got to give, and you got to stop with that. So I think veteran stopgap, someone like a Jameis Winston would be the guy. And I know that's not a very exciting option, but it's probably the best, because the Jets aren't going to win many games next year anyway, I don't think. Next question, John, with the NFL salary cap, would you like to see what Major League Baseball teams are doing and have deferred payments way into the future instead of the 5-year max? Well, I think it's difficult. So if you're following baseball, a lot of teams defer payments to players like years and years down the line. So you sign a $100 million contract, but a lot of that money gets paid 10 years, 15 years down the line. So it's not really a $100 million contract. So right now, when an NFL team defers a payment, NFL teams don't really defer payments as much as they defer cap hits. So if I give you like a signing bonus is an example of a team it's actually kind of the opposite of a deferred payment, because the signing bonus is paid up front, but the cap hits are spread out over multiple seasons. So if you sign a 5-year contract with a $10 million signing bonus, you get the $10 million right up front, but it counts against the cap over the course of a 5-year deal. A $10 million signing bonus counts equally $2 million, $2 million, $2 million, $2 million, $2 million, $2 million a piece over the lifetime of the contract. So NFL teams don't really defer money as much as they defer cap hits, and that's how they do it. I think it would make things very complicated if NFL teams were allowed to defer money deeper into the future, though. I think that I like the way the NFL works right now. I think the salary cap works better. I think the NFL's financial system is much better than baseball's financial system. And look, I root for the Yankees, so obviously the Yankees benefit a lot from baseball's financial system. There's no salary cap, and the Yankees are the biggest market of big market teams, even though I know they just lost Juan Soto to the Mets. But the Yankees benefit a lot more than they lose based on the baseball finances. I think the NFL has a better system, because I think the NFL, everybody's got an equal shot. It's all about how smart you are. It's all about what you earn in the NFL. Whereas baseball, a lot of it's how much money you have. I would not like. I'd like to see baseball become more like the NFL than I'd like to see the NFL become more like baseball when we talk about the finances of these things. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, let's focus on the core members of the New York Jets. Yes, the New York Jets do have some core players, but these are players whose contract situations are going to need to be addressed sooner rather than later. I have some thoughts on that, and I'll tell you what they are as we continue here on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Ice Shaker. Hey, Locked On Jets fans, I know you're like me and your holiday shopping is, let's just say, far from complete. All right, I haven't started yet. I really need to start today. Call me on it tomorrow if I haven't started my holiday shopping by then. Well, anyway, I've got the perfect gift for passionate sports fans in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and Major League Baseball, and will make the ideal gift. Created and used by the Gronkowski brothers. We won't hold it against them. I know Rob Gronkowski was a Patriot, but Ice Shakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They've changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% off your order. It's third-party tested. It'll hold ice for 30-plus hours. It's also customizable. You can send your logo or check out the custom shop to customize your favorite bottle. Turnaround time on custom bottles is only 3 to 5 business days. Order your team-branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Again, it's iceshaker.com, code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams in the best branded workout bottles on the market. Ice Shakers. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday. We're doing our weekly mailbag show. Our next question, John, the Jets have three guys, Sauce Gardner, Breece Hall, and Garrett Wilson, that can all be extended this year. Who would you prioritize, and is there any of the three you look to trade? Look, I would try and sign all of them. I think one thing that's been proven in recent NFL history is that you're almost always better off giving your money to retain your own good players than you are trying to bring in other teams' players, because it's just a different circumstance. It's different, different locker room, different chemistry, different vibes. I know the Jets are installing a new system. So normally, normally your guys, are good fits for the system. Jets obviously are going to be installing new systems on both sides of the ball. So we can't really speak to that, but these are guys who are really good players. And I just think you're always better off keeping your own guys who are good than you are, trying to import guys in free agency from other teams, because we've seen over and over that bringing in free agency, paying big money to free agents from other teams fails a lot more than it succeeds. So I would not actively look to trade any of these guys. I think that this is the offseason where you try and lock all three of them up. How would I prioritize them? I think Garrett Wilson's number one because of the season he's having. I mean, in a lost Jets season, Garrett Wilson's playing excellent football. And, I don't want to let Garrett Wilson get anywhere close to free agency because he's been in losing environments. He's never had good quarterback play. He's still 2 years away. If the Jets exercise his fifth-year option, he's still 2 years away from free agency. So if you do it now, he might say, all right, well, I'll take my payday. I don't want to wait 2 years for my big payday. You let him get closer to free agency, he might see the grass is greener. He might say, well, I want to go to a better quarterback situation. I want to go to a team that wins more. So I don't think you want to let him get close to free agency. I think he's having a phenomenal season. So Garrett Wilson's my number one guy. Sauce Gardner is my number two guy. I'm a little bit nervous about Sauce. And this is crazy because at the start of the season, Sauce Gardner, of this trio, Sauce Gardner would have been by far my number one priority. I'm a little worried about Sauce. And I think you need to look into what's going on with him this season. Has he been playing hurt? Is it just a random slump? Or is there something deeper going on? Because if there is something deeper going on, then I think you look to trade him. But I want to give Sauce the benefit of the doubt because he was so dominant those first two seasons. So I'd be inclined to keep Sauce, but I would be a little bit hesitant. I think the Jets really need to do some digging to figure out what's happened to him this season. And Breece Hall would be my number three guy just because he's a running back and because he's frankly not as good as the other guys. I mean, I think we all had dreams of Breece Hall being a top 5 running back, and he's just not that. But he is still a good player. And I know you don't give running back second contracts, but I feel like I feel like the NFL's gone too far to that extreme. I feel like, there was a point where NFL teams were maybe investing a little bit too much at the running back position, and the pendulum has swung. And it swung to I think it just swung too far because you look across the league, there are a lot of free agent backs who signed contracts this year, which are not, which are good money for running backs, but they aren't like the bank breaking money that, wide receivers are getting or quarterbacks are getting, and you know the list: Saquon Barkley with Philly and Derrick Henry in Baltimore, Josh Jacobs in Green Bay. And these guys aren't getting monster money. And it helps they've paid huge dividends for their football teams. The other aspect of this, I've heard Jets fans say they want to trade Breece, but I just don't think Breece is going to bring back much in a trade. I think Breece is more valuable to you on this team, and I don't think Breece is going to command a top dollar contract. I think Breece is going to command a moderate contract because the production is just not there. The production's just not there to demand a top dollar contract. So I'd be inclined to keep Breece. Again, I think that we've said this, and I've probably said this in the past, about the dangers of giving a running back a second contract, but we've gone so far to the other end that it's almost now like running backs are becoming undervalued in the league based on what we've seen. So I'd look to sign all three of the guys because the Jets cap is tight for next season. But in the long run, there's plenty of flexibility to bring back all these young contributors. We could throw Jermaine Johnson into the mix, although I'd want to see Jermaine respond from coming back from the injury. And Elijah Vera-Tucker, who I think is having a good season, that's another guy. I think that's actually one of the top jobs the next Jets GM has is lock up the quality young players on this team. Because as bad as this season's been, as frustrating as this has been, there actually is a decent base of talent. This is not like 2020. It's not like 2014. Those were situations where the Jets had nothing in the